Welcome to Amy Serrault's Tales of Tomorrow. Brought to you by the Asteroid Miners Guild of Sol 3, the Sparkly Rock Corporation, the League of Exquisite Toaster Bistros, and generous listeners like you, all around the planet Earth. Some program content is either in public domain, Creative Commons, or is believed to fall under the Fair Use Doctrine for non-commercial use for review or critique. Otherwise, it is copyright by Star Publishing. All rights reserved.
Welcome to Tales from Tomorrow, audiobook readings presented by the Sparkly Rock Corporation.
The veranda summer was not yet officially here yet. In the mid-elevations of the North American Catskill Mountains, crocus are oblivious to such human perspectives. They know only the warmth of the sun's reflection from a whitewashed wall upon a dormant flower bed. Their internal alarm clock goes off, and when they wake up, boy do they wake up. Overnight, in a span of an hour they grow an inch or more, 2.54 centimeters for you non-imperial measure folks. The fly crocus are not the only things that are awakened by the welcome warmth of late winter sunshine. Out on the enclosed veranda, where I had just finished my breakfast repast of an egg, a bit of sausage, toast with jam and a cup of coffee, a certain fly had hibernated beneath a window frame. A leaky one apparently. One that had blown warm air over it during the harsh winter just past. A little extra sunshine was all it took for it to come to life once again. The wispy molecules of food remnants probably didn't hurt either. Soon, I became aware of it, buzzing about in the background as I scribbled notes on a long-dead manuscript. One that had no hope of being resuscitated. And yet I was entertained by my own dogmatic persistence in such things. The fly not as much, for it seemed oblivious of me and was more interested in getting on with the business that nature had hardwired into its physical form, and was energetically sampling a drop of sausage. We lived on a farm when I was young, and I learned a few skills that have since proven of questionable value. One such skill was that of catching flies. Most common house flies of the variety now busying itself on the edge of my breakfast remains have a visual blind spot toward the back of their body. It's a small sliver to be sure, but one that when properly gauged can be exploited by a quick hand. This morning, my assessment was correct and my hand speedy. With a slow, silent approach, followed by a quick upward swipe, you have to anticipate the angle of its takeoff, for it will always see you eventually. I captured it. With no small amount of internal glee, rather childlike too, I put my tightly closed fist up to my ear where I heard the creature's frantic buzzing. The spider at that moment, the unthinkable occurred. I heard a voice, just as clearly as you hear these words in your own mind now, say to me, "Are you going to eat that?" To say I was a bit startled might be sort of an understatement, even more so because I was, as near as a quick glance around could discern, devoid of any other human company. A slight movement of a large dark spot on the white tablecloth caught my attention. There, a small spider was frozen, all 8 eyes seemingly focused upon me, or perhaps more on my hand where the buzzing fly was fully occupied with escape. I heard again the voice, "Sorry to bother you, but are you going to eat that?" It was clear, distinct, and a bit louder it seemed. Since there was nobody else but me, the fly and the spider, I had to presume it was the spider communicating the request. After all, it was logical. The fly might be talking about the sausage bit, but those muted buzzing sounds were too incoherent to register as anything but panic and terror. Therefore, I concluded, rightfully I thought, it must be the spider or my imagination. Being a writer of sorts, I was somewhat experienced in talking to things that aren't really there, but this was different. This voice was more like one of those bone conduction devices, or perhaps an as yet invented thought transfer device of science fiction. At any rate, the voice was loud, in my native language and making sense given the context of reality at this moment. Go with the flow is always a good strategy when the strange and unusual occurs. No, I have no plans to eat the fly, I said, directing my gaze and full attention to the spider. Well, what are you going to do with it? Asked the spider. I hadn't really given it much thought, I said, probably just let it go. After all, it was just an impulse to see if I still had what it takes. So, you terrorized it just to see if you could. Interesting. Well, it was not my intention to terrorize it. You make it sound like some premeditated evil, I said. To which the spider replied, yes, well, you can probably put yourself in the fly's predicament and get some sense of the situation from its perspective. However, should you deign to allow us to enter your clenched hand, we should administer a soothing toxin that will quickly immobilize it and calm it. You might then open your hand, and we would carry it up to our home for a tasty meal. I was rather taken aback by the gist of its conversation. So much so that I had moved my fist and placed it upon the table near the spider. As I pondered its words, my hand relaxed ever so slightly, and the fly, seeing a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak, made quick its escape. Well, there goes lunch, said the spider. The fly, whom I thought mute and incapable of any similar communication as the spider, exclaimed as it flew off, "Praise the Lord of Flies, a miracle of divine intervention." The spider, apparently dejected, scampered off the table and back to whence it came. I was left to ponder the events having just transpired. While not being a particularly religious person, I was, at the moment, in a state of profound reflection upon the fly's words. One might infer, perhaps rightly so given the statement of the fly, that flies, some at least, are in fact religious in a way similar to humans. The fly, in a hopeless predicament, had appealed to a higher authority and was rewarded by an outcome that was to its benefit. But didn't it know that it was only my preoccupation while conversing with the spider that had caused my hand to relax? Would it care why? After all, does why matter as long as the outcome is the desired one? The spider and fly were now both gone. The sun risen high enough in the morning sky that the warmth on the veranda was fading. I gathered my breakfast remains, writing artifacts, and rejoined the larger part of the house while contemplating the ensuing day. The god affected was my turn now. Naked and shivering, I had been forced into the tube above their feeding table. They liked their food alive, warm and still able to scream in terror. I was determined not to give them that satisfaction, but who knows what will happen until it does. My mind had temporarily left this body for an alternate reality, one where the Zizks did not exist and hadn't invaded Earth and turned humanity in another source of food and entertainment. The fly and I were one, and I found my thoughts racing along the same lines, not praying to the Lord of Flies, but to those that had apparently abandoned humanity in its darkest hour, praying for some form of divine intervention. At this point, I would settle for the spider and some of its knockout juice. One of the Zizks pressed a panel on the outside of the tube, and the floor opened beneath me. I fell downward, toward a bright light at the end of the tunnel. It probably wasn't what I hoped it would be, but that's just the pessimistic me. The optimistic me was still holding out for that divine intervention.
Thank you for joining us and listening to our story. We hope you enjoyed the reading and invite you to join us again next rotation for another story from Amy Serorts. Tales from Tomorrow.